Hi, so this is a video to answer Saaad888's question on my Reddit Ask Me Anything, AMA, Saaad888. There were 13 parts to this question, so I thought I would do a video to try to burn through it real quick, and then I'll link it in the comment. So number one, just to be clear, are you with the Copenhagen Wolves, or does CW mean anything else? Yes, I'm with the Copenhagen Wolves. Number two, how do you handle player depression, mainly referring to depression from losing streaks or constant online harassment due to poor performance? Okay, so depression has to be non-clinical. If it's clinical, then I would refer it to a licensed therapist, to a clinical psychologist. However, if the depression is just like coping, for example, with losing streaks or online harassment, then let me think about this for a minute. I guess I would start by kind of trying to reframe loss as growth, because that's essentially what it is. Like in sport, you lose and you win, and both of those should be learning experiences. You should be trying to compete in a mastery mindset, which is like trying to be better than yourself, instead of a competitive mindset, trying to be better than other people. Now, at the highest level, of course, there's the drive to win in leagues and things like that. And so you have to have coping mechanisms and support networks built up for that. So I would ask the player what kind of support network they have, and we'd identify holes in that support network, and then I would talk to them about how they could possibly fill those with people that they can either train to fill those roles, like tell them what they need, or we can talk to the coach about how they or their teammates could fill those roles in their support network, or then I would be hired to do it. So I could then support them. Constant online harassment due to poor performance. I think the answer to that is like to stay offline. And then I would work with the performance being related to thinking about that feedback, because that's the real problem here, is that if it's just poor performance and you're just not good enough, okay, well, you kind of earn it. But if it's poor performance because you're thinking about all the frustration and harassment you're going to get, then that's choking. And that's a focus on like the self or the like non-task related things. And so I would work on focus training. Focus training is like being able to focus on the task instead of the self, being able to focus on the present, not thinking about the future or the past, and then being able to focus on just on what's important instead of like judgment. So like non-judgmental observation of what's going on in your gameplay. Number three, what about player health? What kind of measures would you put in place if you had total control over a team's practice regime to make sure everyone remains mentally healthy? If I had total control, I would institute very strict morning routines. Okay, this is best case scenario. I'm just going to go crazy with this question, okay? So number one, there'd be a morning routine, and it would involve journaling and meditation. Number two, there would be a very strict structure between try-hard training and like moderate drills training and kind of more relaxed training, and then fun. Because a lot of teams right now, they just like, we're going to train. And then they're like, why did that game suck? Why did this game feel so good? They don't differentiate between how much they need to focus in each game. And so they berate themselves for like not being able to focus when they really should not be training super hard. And then they don't actually have those kinds of really intense focus games during the week. They leave those for like the performance, and then they feel like, well, we can't really ever feel in training like we do when we compete in the LCS. So is training even worth it? Okay, number four, in terms of interactions between players, do you ever actively try to find out if any of the players are discontent with their teammates? In other words, if one player does okay, how do I find out? Yes, I do this, and I do it through one-on-one sessions, and then we do like informal roles. So there's a whole bunch of informal roles that are usually on a sports team, and we'll talk about those. And there's a bunch of negative ones as well, and we talk about those negative roles and we identify them. And then I work on two aspects. I work on the problem player and also the person who perceives the problem, because it takes two to tango. And it's not always that the person who's causing the perceived problem is the problem. It's half the person who's then perceiving the problem generally. So just as an example, like there might be a distractor on a certain team where like they cope with things by like trying to distract their teammates, or they cope with being critiqued by trying to distract and say like, oh, they make excuses, or they like, let's talk about this instead, or they just like ignore it and then don't say anything. And so then I would work with that person on kind of like why they're avoiding these things and what that means about their approach to their career. And then also the people who are doing it, maybe they're presenting it wrong for this person's like feedback style. So you have to be really considerate of how you give feedback in sport, especially when you're dealing with like young athletes and developing athletes, because it really makes a difference before you have that really like championship ego that says like, well, I can just take any feedback because I know I'm great and I'm just going to keep plugging forward. Before you have that indestructible sense of self, it's really easy for other people to simply destroy who you are and what you're trying by giving you negative criticism. Okay. Number 5, if you do find out that there's an issue in the team, such as players, how do you resolve them? If one player is being exceptionally stubborn, how would you try to deal with them? I'm trying to figure out if you're asking for advice like how you would deal with your teammates or how I would deal with the teammates. How I would deal with them is I would have one-on-one sessions and I would explain to them why stubbornness is not a helpful viewpoint for a competitive athlete. So if you want to be a champion, you're not going to be stubborn and get there. Unless you're talking about stubbornness like willingness to just keep trying and failing no matter what. But I think you're talking about stubbornness like I'm right and you're wrong, which is, I mean, it's just you're not going to be very good if you're limited by that belief. So it's kind of just like a personal belief and immaturity, in my opinion. Okay, do you ever worry about, number 6, do you ever worry about overconfidence in victory with your players? And if so, how do you try to manage that? I think that actually a lot of problems that players have is they're not confident enough. If you look at TSM right now, they have what I would call an inevitability mindset. They are so confident that they're going to win that they can be behind and simply keep plugging along and be like, it's okay, we just got to keep focused because we're going to win. And then at some point, like the game-changing play comes along, they're like, oh, here it is. This is what we were waiting for. Like, this is the part where we now win the game. And so that is a very powerful mindset to have. And that is what you would call overconfidence, you know. I like to say that you leave coping for after the loss. Like a lot of people try to cope beforehand. They hedge their performance. They're like, we might lose. Be careful. Don't think too highly of yourself or whatever. I want you to go into the game like believing that you're going to absolutely dominate your opponent, Faker, the mid laner. Because you have to have that belief to conquer the kinds of fears that are going to make you play passively, make you play reactively, and in order for you to have control over your own gameplay and game style. And so then you lose and you get dominated. Then after the game, you cope with that. You cope with your inevitability mindset. But okay, if you're overconfident, like too relaxed, that's a focus issue. So there's overconfidence like, keep focused, we're going to win this. And there's overconfidence like, psh, we're going to win this. And that is like a big difference, okay? And that has to do with focus, not confidence. So I want you to keep focused and keep your energy level up and not like allow your overconfidence to let you relax in a way and distribute your focus or disperse your focus. Okay, number 7, how important do you think a sports psychologist is in top-tier esports teams? Do you think it's something a team should always have? Yes, very important. They should have it. Number 8, how expensive would it be for an average team to have a sports psychologist ready at their disposal? If you want to get a student, you can do it for free. If you want to get a recent graduate, you can do it for anywhere from 25 to 75 euros an hour. If you want to get a professional, you're going to be paying 50 to 100 plus euros an hour. And if you're doing it like one-on-one, training with each player, then you're going to be probably do the hourly billing thing. I like consultations or consulting styles where you bill by like goals. Like that's what I do with my teams. I set training goals and we work towards them, and then I gauge their satisfaction. Like, did we reach it? And then that is what I like charge on. I don't charge on like one-on-one time because I want to be able to give more of my time without costing the team more money so that we can get more results, because I'm results focused. So I hope that answered that question. Number 9, most players in esports are very young and still mentally developing. Are there any unique problems which arise because of this, which would not occur with players of higher level of maturity? Yes. Social and emotional skills, social and emotional education is a really big thing in coaches for youth sport. My focus was youth sport a lot when I was doing my education, because I wanted to be a youth sports coach, and that's what I was doing professionally. So funnily enough, a lot of those skills apply very well to the esports setting. So the unique problems that arise are that all of these really advanced Olympic psychological skills are very squeezing out the last 1% of performance kind of stuff. And the players on esport teams are 1% improvement due to imagery is not going to make much of a difference if they're just choking because they're losing, because they can't cope with losing. So I think that social and emotional skills training is a really big part. I mean, competitive mindset, competitive identity, these kinds of things are really low-hanging fruit for training esport teams. Number 10, many people make the argument that because the players are young and because professional teams almost always require a gaming house, that women will never find success in a pro team until the current pro team meta changes. What's your opinion on the matter? I think that's bullcrap. I think that esport is poised to be one of the most powerful leveling forces on the planet as far as inequality in competition, in human competition. So for the first time in history, we have a competitive environment which is sport-based, so it involves motor control and motor action, that is not predicated on things like height and size and strength and these kind of things that are determined by your genetics in a way, like how tall you are and how strong you are, and then your athleticism. So we have people who can be short, beating people who are perfectly born as far as their genetic makeup. And I think that is incredible, and nothing is going to stop this leveling tide. I'm sorry, but there are so many women out there who are super competitive, and there's nothing that's going to stop that from developing. And so esport in the next 10 years is going to experience an explosion in this kind of ability to provide a platform where people can compete with each other on an equal playing field. And for the first time ever, we will have a non-gender split sport, which is just phenomenal in my mind. Number 11, on the topic of gaming houses, how much do you think they actually benefit the team? That's a financial thing. They just do it because it's cheaper. It doesn't benefit the team at all. Team Liquid a while back announced that the work environment and living environment are separated. Awesome. Yeah, that's what I heard. But I haven't seen that. I heard that they were doing that and then they couldn't afford it. So I think what they did was we're all living together here and then we're all working in an office. So that's a good step up. But I'd like to see that we're all living separately and responsible for our own lives and have to mature up and gain those skills. And then we go to work in an office like they kind of do in China pretty much. Okay. Yet a lot of other teams find success in just having one large house where everyone lives. On an individual basis, I would assume it comes down to the type of person, but on a general basis, what are the pros and cons of each? The pros are that you as a team manager can ensure success. So the problem here is that teams at the highest level want to win and they don't want to waste their money. So it's more effective for them to have a gaming house where they can control their athletes. That's bad for long-term growth for the scene because all the athletes may stay immature. And so the team that distributes out and says okay, all you players just go find an apartment and live by yourself and come every morning to the office. This is where we train. Their players are going to have to learn a whole bunch of new skills really rapidly, and they're not going to cope very well right out of the gate. And they're not going to be able to compete very well with other teams maybe for, I don't know, a season, a half a season or whatever. That's just my guess as to why it hasn't happened yet. Also because of money. Players aren't going to want to go to a team where they have to start covering their own expenses out of their salary like it is done in all other sport. So I think it'll happen because the benefits outweigh the cons at the developmental level. You're going to get stronger athletes in that kind of setting when people are living on their own. That's one of the reasons I really like C9's setup is they have, and actually I think I've seen this in CLG's house as well. You have your computer in your own room because one of the biggest problems with the like single room line of computers is that in your off time, you're like mentally still there in the work environment. You're still being judged. And so it's harder for you to just like be on in the zone when you're training if that's also the place where you're relaxing. Like those two should be different physical spaces. And also, let's say that you're like just not having a good week and you're not training very well and you just need some like rest time. So you're doing poorly, and then at night, in the evenings after scrims, you're like, so you're not solo queuing. You know, let's say you're like playing Hearthstone, or you're just like hanging out on the internet and your teammates are all looking at that and you're feeling judged and they're feeling like you're slacking off. And in reality, if you were at your own apartment, nobody would care what you were doing because you're at your own apartment, you're off of your work, and you would be able to autonomously decide that like, I want to train right now instead of feeling pressured like you have to train because everybody's watching you and you're performing poorly this week. So that's a horrible motivational environment. Okay, number 12, inexperienced and newer players are often suffer from land nerves. Esports stage fright. How do you deal with players suffering from land nerves? Yeah, so this is because they cannot, in training, mimic this environment. So the first thing I do is I try to get them to mimic that environment in training so that they're actually training how they want to play, so that when they go and play, it's how they train, right? So you have to ramp up the pressure in the training environment so that the games actually matter, because it's partly stage fright and it's partly with a bunch of people there, and it's partly that like the games really actually matter. Like in scrims, you can lose and it doesn't mean anything. And so then the second thing that you can do is this pre-performance preparation so that you can get over that first 5 minutes and kind of like get in the zone in a way. And then you need experience. That's the third big thing that helps with that. And then with inexperienced and newer players, what I would do is mindfulness training, like being able to focus on the now and do a centering exercise is what they're called. So you like feel stuff kind of going out of control and your thoughts are spiraling into a really bad place. So you do a centering exercise to like bring it back and focus on the task that's at hand instead of the runaway thoughts in your head that are going to like the Reddit comments that you're going to get for just screwing up the big play that you made, or that you didn't make, I guess. And 13, and finally, tilt is by far the biggest problem any player at any level can suffer from a gameplay perspective. So how do you train your players to not tilt when the game is going poorly? Again, it comes back to focus. You have to focus on the now. You have to focus on being non-judgmental towards your performance. You have to focus on the task and get out of your own head. Stop sabotaging yourself. And then you need to look at switching the momentum around. And you have to, like, so tilting essentially is when you try to overly control an automated motor movement that causes you then to, like, mess up that automated motor movement so it's no longer an elite skill. It's like when you play down to that somebody at lower level. Or it's also when you narrow your focus like this, so like you have a horse with blinders on and you don't notice things that you normally would notice, but then like you're just fixated so strongly on like one thing that you don't see the jungler coming out of the bush right there to kill you. You're just like, you don't even notice it till Vi is hitting you and you're like, oh, where did she come from? So in order to kind of keep that from happening, it's really about like decentering yourself from the disaster train wreck that's happening and refocusing on what's important. And I like to train teammates to pull their teammates out of tilting, because that is way easier and far more powerful, and it's going to happen sooner than me training you how to pull yourself out of choking. So that's how I work on that, because it's really like you have to communicate with yourself, but if somebody else just does it for you, like we believe what other people say much more readily than what we tell ourselves. And so it's harder to train you to convince yourself of something than it is to just tell your teammate, like, this is what your teammate needs to hear when they're choking, and this is how you can like get them out of that place and get them focused back in the game. Okay. Thanks for the awesome questions. That was crazy. I hope that this uploads quickly. How do I turn this thing off?